Sadgamaya. Please repeat after me.
Sadgamaya.
Jyotir
Tirgamaya. Mrityu.
Orma Amritangamayam. Om Shanti Shanti. We wish our journey to be from untruth to the truth. We wish our journey take us from darkness to the light. We wish our journey to take us from death to immortality. We wish peace for everyone. And then let's also begin our today's session with a Shanti and blessings prayer. You can repeat after me. Om Sahana Vavatu
Sahana Vavatu.
Bhunaktu
Sahana Bhunaktu.
Sahaviryam Karavavahai
Viryam Karavavahai.
Tejasvinavaditamastu
Tejasvinavadhitamastu.
Ma Vidvishavahai.
Ma Vidvishavahai.
Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Welcome everyone for the wonderful Yoga Foundation STEM camp. And thank you so much for taking your precious time this weekend to share your yoga practice and yoga journey with all of us. So I'm Srini Gurapu. I'm going to give a little bit more introduction about myself in just a moment. We just chanted about 2 shlokas. I assume everybody would have heard these 2 shlokas. Does anybody have any explanation on why we invoke Shanti, Shanti, Shanti 3 times? Raju? So how about we do this as a Google exercise for tomorrow? So
yeah. Sorry, I was on mute.
Raju, you want to share what the why we say Shanti, Shanti, Shanti for 3 times?
Yeah. So, most of the time, people lose the peace. We lose the peace because of 3 things. One is because of the mental. Other one is physical. The other one is from gods. I mean, catastrophes like natural disaster, something like that. So, Adhyatmika, Adhibautika, and what is the other one? Adidevika. So these 3 things. So we should always we should always pray the God for giving peace in these 3 aspects. Internal peace, mental peace. We should have a peace mentally. We should have peace physically. That means our inner body health and from external disturbances. And Adidevika means, that's something which is not in our control at all. We become the victims of this, calamity. Yeah, that's my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Excellent. So in the yoga system, we always perceive our universe in 3 worlds. One is the inner world. The second one is the physical, the jiva, the costume that we wear, and then the external world, which is the cosmos. And as we get into more of the yoga philosophy, we sometimes refer that to Atman, that's your inner world, and then the Brahman, and then the Jiva. Yoga is all about getting an alignment in harmony across the 3 worlds so that we establish harmony. This is such a beautiful opening prayer. Asatoma Sadgamaya. In fact, yoga is all about our journey in every moment of our life, where we are constantly striving to go from untruth to the truth. And the truth is absolute. And the second one is from the darkness to the light, tamasoma jyotirgamaya. And then the third one is mrityorma and amritangamaya. We all wear this physical costume in our life where the physicality is very finite, where death is the universal truth. But what yoga system believes us, or Sanatana Dharma, or the Sankhya philosophy believes is that we are nothing but we are the infinite beings. So again, realization that we are going from finite to the infinite, or the death to immortality, and then invoke the peace. So once again, thank you so much. What I would like to do is, I would like to go around and have all of you introduce about yourself very briefly about who you are. And most importantly, if you can share a little bit more about your definition of yoga, what you think yoga is. And the second one is, how much of a yoga practice did you do, whether you do a couple of hours or some time or this stuff. And then the third one is, if you can also share what are some of your objectives that you would like to get, through this 4-day camp over the next 10 hours or in the continued journey thereafter. So I would like one of you to volunteer and go around, and if you're not comfortable sharing that, that's also perfectly fine. And I would recommend you to open up your video session and the audio session so that we could make this very interactive. But if you're not comfortable doing that, that's perfectly fine. So that anybody would want to start?
Yeah, I can go first. This is Ajay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So this is Ajay Prabhu. So in terms of what yoga will benefit me, I'm mainly looking for both mental and physical benefits. Currently, the only experience I have is I do Surya Namaskar and do a few stretches, but that's the extent of my yoga knowledge. I've done some yoga as a kid and, really enjoyed that experience. And so I've gotten away from it. And so wanting to get back in.
Excellent. Next.
This is Raju Validendi. So I'm friend of Srinivas Gurapu, the teacher. We've been friends since '87. We studied in the same college, and I've been doing yoga since 2013. And yeah, pretty much, all my family members, they are doing the yoga since 2013, on and off. And I got into a lot deeper into several aspects. I'm an explorer. Try to get into multiple things like Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Raja Yoga. So trying to set my path of sadhana, yoga is a tool. Yoga is it's one of the part of ingredient of our sadhana path. To what? That is something, I don't want to discuss now, but, as you get deeper into this yoga practice, and Srini is great at throwing great wisdom. That's one reason I love to hear him, join him. So yeah, that's about me. That's my understanding of yoga and practice. Thank you very much, Srini.
Next. Pothraj?
I am Srikanth Pothraju. I'm a friend of GS. I'm a beginner in everything. I have very limited knowledge about yoga. So I'm an extreme beginner. So I'm trying to gain inner peace and physical peace in that order by going through this. This is my journey. I'm just starting. So I'm hoping, I know I have a good guru. So I'm hoping that, we can all, reach that stage.
Excellent. Thank you. Next.
I could go next, Srini. Hey, everybody. This is Kiran Kokunda. I would say I am a yoga enthusiast and a yoga learner. To me, what yoga means is really like the state of mind, right? So when I started off, yoga was like synonymously asanas, but it didn't take me too long to understand that it's like way beyond asanas, right? Really, asanas are like one small segment of the bigger picture. So I think that I'm actually kind of motivated and excited by that, like how vast yoga can be if we understand the depth and breadth of it. So, and I mean, I have been like, in Srini's company for last 2 years or so, and there is so much that I have learned. But at the same time, I learned that there is so much more to learn. So, just being part of these sessions, experiencing both the physical and mental aspects of yoga is always an exciting and motivating aspect. So looking forward.
Thank you so much for joining. For the rest of you, Kiran has been my partner in conducting these camps over the past several years, and in fact I was trying to encourage her to lead some of the sessions for this week. Perhaps you will succeed in that. Thank you, Kiran. And who wants to go next? Priya, are you there? Okay, if you're done with it, if you're comfortable, share the session. So let me share a little bit about my yoga journey.
Srini, I'm here.
Oh, okay, Priya, come on, go ahead.
So, thank you. Sorry, I'm in the middle of packing. My house is a mess. Please ignore. And yeah, to me, I think as a practicing Hindu, and I've always been brought up to understand things, question them as well. So I like things which take a wholesome approach to well-being, or be it mental, physical, whatsoever. And that's how I see yoga. It's fun for me. It's both for physical fitness as well as for mental health. And I have many times in the past wanted to pursue, but because of other circumstances, I've not been able to actively do it. So your Sunday sessions have been immensely helpful, Srini. And after a back injury, especially, they've made a huge difference. That one day a week has made a difference, and now I'm following your video more often. And I see yoga as a very balanced approach to things. It's fun to do the occasional Zumba session, but I think yoga, there is no stress to rush yourself. You stop where you can, and there is no one size fits all. And I think yoga understands that. Maybe that's a presumptuous statement, but that's how I see it. And I think what's wonderful is that, as you say, it's a journey. There is room for customization as to what the individual wants to accomplish. And then there is a pace that you can take on your own. All of this is very appealing to me. And as I said, I grew up in India and I'm a practicing Hindu. So I'm not trying to bring religion into it. To me, even Hinduism is not a religion, it's a way of life. And if you understand it right, there's a lot you can get out of it. So that's how I see yoga as well. I won't claim that I will become a super practitioner like you or somebody who can teach other people, but I would like to enjoy the journey, and I want to encourage as many people as possible that I come across to join this journey.
Thank you, Priya.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your enthusiasm and energy. So a little bit about myself, and I framed my yoga journey into 3 phases. In fact, I wrote a blog about, it's called The Seed, The Need, and The Heat. So the seed is, as a kid, I went to a Gurukul in India. So from 5th to 10th, I went to a Gurukul away from home, where we were supposed to wake up every day in the morning at 5:30 and then go run 3 laps and then do some yoga for 30 minutes. And I really hated it. And there was this deal, or in Italian, it's called affare. There was this affare where if kids who volunteered to clean restrooms and sweep drums, they get an excuse to not participate in the yoga. I would always be the first one to volunteer for that. But of course, you're not always lucky to get that first position to sweep the dorms. So in that case, I always find some excuse to bunk the classes and so on and so forth. So in those days, in the Gurukul, if you miss a yoga class or in the morning routine, the physical educator would actually would call you, and then they would kind of spank you, right? There was this big cane, and then they would ask you to flip your fingers, and then they would hit you. For me, I thought that punishment was actually worth a lot more than going to the yoga. And the reason for that is I never really understood the essence of it. Or perhaps the way that yoga was taught to me was not convincing and so that I could actually take up with the practice. But nevertheless, the seed for yoga was planted in me. And since then, my life has taken on a journey. I came to the United States, and I've been very fortunate to be part of several successful startups. But I never had a doubt in myself. And then until 2007, where I had 2 back-to-back colossal failures in my entrepreneurial journey. And colossal is kind of how I understood it. And until that time, I was only enjoying the success. And even though I came from a very humble beginnings, but I was always going linearly in a forward way. And then I did not know how to handle failure. I did not know how to handle failure. I was going through a lot of anxiety and a lot of doctor trips and so on and so forth. And that's when, again, I re-entered into the path of world of yoga. And that's when the need phase started. The seed was when I was a kid, and then the need started. And this time, I was so in tune with it to understand the essence, and I wanted to practice. And during that phase, I was also doing other physical activity like running without proper training and all these other things. And that really hurt my back in a bad way. And the doctors tell me even now that I have one of the worst spines that they could see. I think there are about 10 discs that are herniated and then degeneration and so on and so forth. The thing was, all the neurosurgeons have told me that you don't have any hope, but you needed to get a surgery. And at that time, I did not want to go under the knife. So there was this need, and sometimes I refer to this as a prosperity mindset. In life, whenever we have challenging situations, how do you frame your approach to moment of learning, a moment of an opportunity? So somehow that need and those challenges and the opportunity, I converted that into an opportunity, and I started invested more into yoga. So in the last, from 2009 to now, I've been probably practicing yoga, the physical postures and the meditation almost daily. There are probably very few days that I skipped. And if I look at my holistic yoga practice or the sadhana aspect, probably I would give at least 2 to 4 hours every day. So the reason for this is, now I refer to that as my deed. Deed is, how much I'm dedicating this to this practice of yoga, to a part where I now believe that yoga is something that I equate to my identity. In other words, yoga is, I would want to associate myself as a yoga as my primary identity. And for work, I work as a vice president for one of the divisions at Apple called Claris. But I always prioritize yoga over my other attachments. So what I would want to do is, today I would want to introduce the core philosophy of yoga, what yoga means. And then what we will do is we spend about an hour to hour and 15 minutes in practicing the daily routine. And then we'll take a quick break, and then we'll again, discuss some of the other aspects of the yoga philosophy. And then we will do, towards the end of today, we will actually do some kind of a workshops where today's focus is about sun salutations, where I would want each one of you, or whoever is comfortable, where we will actually have each one of you do the sun salutations, and then we can all participate in corrections and providing the feedback. So that actually enhances our learning in a much better way. And then the second sloka that we recited at the beginning of the session is Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavakai. What it means is, this is a prayer that we invoke as part of every learning experience. What it says is, both the teacher and the student are seeking the blessings to be nourished by the divine. And the same thing, we seek the blessings to give our 100% effort. When we are in the class, we are only entitled to give our 100%, not about the outcomes. But that is something that we can control with the discipline and the effort. And then the third one is Mavid Vishavahai. Let there be no competition between each other or between the teacher and the student. What that means is, this is our individual journey. If we have to compete with somebody, we're going to compete with ourselves. So it's not about who is doing better, who is doing less. In fact, it's all about yoga, is all about your individual experience. And as Priya said, it's our own individual journey. So with that, any questions so far? So before I begin, I also would want to offer my gratitude and prayers to Ekashri Schools of Yoga. This is a yoga school. If you're interested, please follow them. What you see in the picture is Sriram Sarvottamji, who is very much known in the field of yoga. It's somebody who is an IIT, who also works at Apple, who's been practicing yoga from the age of 12. It's probably the most divine soul that I've come across, and I regard him as one of my gurus. And to the right is Ekaji, his wife, and both of them together, I've partnered with them to start a yoga school on their name. It's called Ekashri Schools of Yoga. Eka means oneness, that we are nothing but, we're all one and we represent unity. And Shri represents prosperity, and prosperity in many different dimensions: wealth, success, love, health, and so many different things. One thing that always struck with me is every time I look at this posture, that Ekashri represents the potential for all of us. The posture is, number one, it represents excellence, it represents joy, it represents success, and it represents the overall well-being. And that's the opportunity that we all have. So hopefully with this foundations course and then your own pursuit thereafter, we all can pursue to be at the level of Sriramji and Ekaji. So some of the knowledge that I'm going to cover today, and as part of the Yoga Sutras, a big part of that is taught to me by Sriramji. And then I also studied some of the other things from Sri Ravi Shankar and other schools of yoga. So the yoga is in the Sanatana Dharma, in our Sankhya philosophy, we all believe that the yoga knowledge was transmitted by Adiyogi or the Shiva to many sages about tens of thousands of years ago. And this is one of the most primitive knowledge, or the knowledge of the universe. Maharshi Patanjali composed all this knowledge of yoga into a series of aphorisms, a series of 196 aphorisms called Yoga Sutras, roughly around 280. And Maharshi Patanjali is one of the great sages. In fact, we give him, we credit yoga system for our mind. And then he's also credited to be the inventor of grammar for Sanskrit. And we also believe that he's the original inventor, or his reincarnation is the inventor of Ayurveda. So there is a prayer to Maharshi Patanjali that says, Yogena Chittasya, that means yoga for the mind, somebody who gave yoga for the mind. Padena Vacha, somebody who gave grammar for walk or speech. And then Malam Shariramcha, who Malam Shariramcha Vaidyakena, for this body that gets illness or impurities, he actually invented Ayurveda. For that, sage Patanjali, Yopakarotam Pravaram Muninam Patanjalim Pranjaros Anotosmi. So what that means is we are offering salutation to that sage Patanjali, who gave us the system of yoga, who gave us the system of grammar, and who gave us the system of Ayurveda for the physical well-being. And then the Yoga Sutra. Sutra is something that is very, very profound. And in fact, if you look in some of the other scriptures, we have many other scriptures like Yoga Sutras, Brahma Sutras, Narada Bhakti Sutras, and so on and so forth. Sutras are defined by how they are structured. In fact, they are very terse and very direct, concise statements. For example, contrast that with something like shloka, like in Bhagavad Gita or Bhagavatam, you have shlokas that actually have more of lyrical and poetical value with some kind of a structure, and sometimes they are even repetitive. But in the case of sutras, this is direct knowledge, and they often adhere to about 6 fundamental tenets. The first one is a sutra or an aphorism is something that starts with alpakshara. That means the few words that can describe the essence. It's all about brevity, alpakshara. And the second characteristic of a sutra is asandigdha. There is no ambiguity. That is, it has to be so direct, no confusion, and it has to reveal the truth. And the third one is saravad. It should capture the essence of the entire knowledge or the wisdom that you're trying to cover. And then vishvatokmukam. It should be able to capture the perspectives from many different dimensions, the point of views across many different dimensions. And then astobha. Astobha means something that's not repetitive. Like, for example, if you contrast it with Bhagavad Gita, if you take a karma yoga or something, that same message is conveyed in many different forms across many different slokas. That's why you have 700 slokas to capture a similar essence of the yoga knowledge. And then the last one is anavadya, something that cannot be proven wrong or irrefutable truths. So Patanjali defined about 196 yoga sutras to capture the essence of the entire yoga system. And let's look at the examples. The first Yoga Sutra, this is one of the beautiful Yoga Sutras that Patanjali defined. It says, Atha Yoga Anushasanam. Atha means now, Yoga Anushasana means it's a discipline that you have to enforce on yourself. Shasana means it's a discipline or the conduct that's enforced by others. Anushasana means it's a discipline or the conduct that we enforce and we want to adhere for ourselves. And why now? In life, depending upon where we are in our stage of life, we often chase after many dreams. Like, for example, when you're the kid, you want to get good grades in school, and then you want to get into a good college. And then we always equate our happiness to achieving some things in life. So like, from the school and the grades and the college, boyfriend, girlfriend, and then donuts or nice, food, or, having a nice house or many houses, stocks and this. And then as we realize through this journey is that all these things only give temporal happiness. None of them actually give permanent happiness. And then we get tired. So what Patanjali then says is that, okay, you've tried everything to get that infinite permanent happiness. I mean, just imagine, right? The mind tricks us into saying that, okay, today if I eat a nice meal, or could even be like, if you're a kid, could be like a nice gulab jamun or a nice donut, or if you're a fan of seafood, or something which is like, if I eat that, I'm going to be happy. But that happiness just is such a short-lived. In fact, you cannot even more donuts if you want to have. Then it actually gives pain. And that's exactly, if you start observing anything that you do, and you think that okay, if I get a girlfriend or a boyfriend or somebody, that you're gonna be happy, but then you realize that all these things they're very temporal. Then what Patanjali said, okay, now you have tried everything in your life in search of that permanent happiness, and then nothing really worked. And then he says, come now, Atha, come, Yoga Anushasana. Apply this self-discipline on yourself. Practice yoga. So that is, and the discipline, self-discipline is actually the most important thing, because you don't need your teacher or your mom or your parent or your kid to tell you to practice the yoga. This is something that you do it. Like, for example, there are certain things that we do by ourselves. Like, when we wake up, we brush our teeth. Nobody has to tell us. That's an anushasana. So we need to make yoga as an anushasana. And the second aspect of this yoga, and we will cover into the next sutra, is, this is probably the most popular definition of yoga that's out there. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Chitta means your mind or the mind's, the thoughts. Chitta, vritti, the mind's tendencies is that mind takes us in different types of activities. It's very random and very turbulent set of activities. It is nirodha, something that can actually restrain that mind so that you can remain calm and you can realize the divinity. That is one of the most profound definitions of yoga. So many of us equate yoga to something that we do on the mat, like in the morning, or doing sun salutations, or like 30 minutes or 60 minutes, and so on and so forth. But that is just one dimension, as Kiran said. The real definition of yoga is how can we restrain this turbulent mind so that we can realize our divinity. That is the definition of yoga. The postures, the breathing, the meditation, the jnana, or the knowledge that we do, is all the different tools. And again, we are going to learn a bunch of different techniques through the course of this camp, but your ultimate goal is the state of mind. And the interesting thing is the word chitta. Chitta is the mind's perception. Actually, the Sanskrit definition of chitta is chit it bhavayeti chitta. Chit means the consciousness or the true identity, the divine, the permanent consciousness that is all pervading within us and all around us, which is almost like the infinite bliss. Chitta iti bhavayeti chitta. That bhavayeti, but that the chit, the consciousness, the divine consciousness that's within us, it manifests using our mind in different distortions. And that's what is the chitta. A great example of that is, like, for example, there is an NBA or NFL game that's happening. There's a game that's happening, and then it gets telecast in the TV and other stuff. So what is happening is the real game is in the field, but then what is projected in the screen is either maybe a slice of it or maybe it's not the exact image, but it's kind of an image that's being telecast. Similarly, our mind is nothing but that like a TV. What is really happening is distorted and it actually gets projected. And that projection sometimes results in anxiety or happiness or the fear. The mind, all of us, if you were to take a quick 5 seconds, close your eyes and try to practice to see what your mind is projecting in your mind, like the thoughts that are going through your mind. Release. So in the yoga, what we'll do is we'll always try to be aware of the thoughts that are going through our mind, and then we try to take control of them, to restrain them. And the other, the yoga philosophy also believes is that all of us identify ourselves with our physical body. Like, for example, my identity, if somebody says, who are you? I say that I'm Srini Gurapu. Gurapu is my last name, Srini is my first name. I look like this, I work at Apple, and this stuff. But if you look at that identity, that is an identity that is given by our mind and our senses. What yoga system believes is our true identity is all of us are Nitya, Suchi, Sukha, Atma. Nitya means we are eternal. When I identified myself as Srini Gurapu, I have to tell my age, 48, and it has an element of finiteness to it. I will only live for a certain time. And then I have pleasures, pain, joy, and this. And I every day I accumulate a lot of impurities. What yoga system believes is that's not our true identity. Our true identity is Nitya, Suchi, Sukha, Atma. Nitya means we are eternal, that we are immortal. Suchi, that means we are always pure, both in our body and the mind. And Sukh, we're always happy. And the last one is Atma, that means we are indivisible. That's our true identity. But this mind puts a filter on us to fail to realize our true identity. And once we restrain that mind and all the chatter, then what happens is, what Patanjali then says is, Tada drastuhu svarupe avasthanam. When the turbulent mind is restrained so that you only have one continuous flow of thoughts, or the harmonious thoughts, that's when tada drastuhu is the real divinity within us, the infinite consciousness, or sometimes that is also referred to as Sat Chit Ananda, that pure infinite consciousness in the bliss, is Swarupe Avasthanam. Avasthanam is, it gets manifested within. We realize our true identity. So the yoga is, number one, it's a 24/7 job. It's not a part-time job. And yoga is not about doing sun salutations or doing some other stuff, but rather yoga is a self-discipline where the objective is to restrain this turbulent mind, so that when the mind is restrained, that's when we realize our true identity, and then we become divine. We become that Satchidananda. Any questions so far? Does this make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So then the Patanjali goes into, but how do we get there? And then Patanjali says, there are two keys to realizing our true identity. The first key is Abhyasa Vairagyabhyam Tannirodha. See how directly, there is no sloka. There is not even a verb. It basically is like yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Tada drastuhu swarupe avasthanam. And then within the next few sutras, it basically says abhyasa, which is a regular practice, vairagyabhyam, when you practice dispassionate and exuberant engagement, tan nirodha, that's how you restrain the mind. Patanjali doesn't waste any extra words. He's very precise. That's what we said. Alpaksharam asandigdam saravat vishvatomukam anavadyam astobam sutram sutra vidanicha. So by doing a regular practice of yoga and by maintaining a dispassionate yet exuberant engagement in whatever you're doing, that's how we can actually that's how we can restrain the mind. And then immediately gets into it, but what is abhyasa? Abhyasa is a practice. It says, Satu dirgha kala nairantara sakkara sevito drudabhumihi. A good practice, a good abhyasa is something that we do for a long period of time. Satu dirgha kala nairantara, without interruption. Sakkara sevito, with full honor and respect. And that's when it becomes rooted in you. Then yoga becomes very much part of you. It's not like something that you would have to motivate yourself to get onto the mat or something. It just becomes part of you. And then the next sutra is about the vairagyam. Vairagyam is, it says, drushyanushravaka vishaya vitrushnasya vashikara sanya vairagyam. What it means is, whatever the activity that you're doing, make sure that you're not get caught up into the outcomes or the sensory illusions or the desires. Whatever you see, drushyanushravika, whatever you hear, whatever you see, or whatever you perceive through your senses, you can actually experience them, but don't get attached or bonded by them. Right? Oftentimes people get confused with vairagya means it's sannyasa. Sannyasa is renunciation. Vairagya is not that. Vairagya is about intense, exuberant engagement in everything that you do. Like, for example, if you're playing a soccer game, go give your 100% exuberant, or if you're singing, or if you're even spending some time with somebody, how can you be intensely and exuberant way to experience that moment, but don't get attached to it, attached to an outcome, or don't because once you get attached, what happens is it results in cravings, and then it actually triggers the mind. Then you're trying to figure it out how to do that. So Vairagya is also, sometimes I equate that to Krishna Tattva. You know, if you kind of interpret the Krishna intensely engages in all the activities like dance, singing, and fighting and this stuff, but he's never attached to any one of them. He's just staying afloat. He's always celebrating life in every moment. And Vairagya is that intense celebration of life. It's not a dullness. Vairagya is not dullness, but rather exuberant way to experience life. So that's kind of the foundational element of Yoga Sutra philosophy. Yoga is a self-discipline. Yoga is all about controlling our mind, restraining our mind so that the mind remains calm with one thought at a time as a continuous harmonious flow. And that's when we realize the true identity of the divine. And then there are two keys. One is Abhyasa, which is a regular, uninterrupted, honorful and respectful practice. And Vairagya is intense exuberation with everything that we do. So with that foundation, let's actually move to doing some yoga practice, which is our daily routine. But before I do that, I want to start with one other Yoga Sutra. A good posture is something that is sthir, sukh, asana. So I would want all of us to keep this in the mind. A good practice is something that's sthir, means very, very stable. And then sukha, which is like there is less struggle, but it's something that's very comfortable, happy, and joyous, where the one good indicator of the sukham is that you are continuously breathing. The breathing becomes normal and you're breathing through the movement of the posture. That is a good posture. So let's not focus on the depth or how we are looking and so on and so forth, but rather focus more on stability and being comfortable in doing the yoga posture. Any questions? Should we do some yoga?
Yes.
Okay. Just give me one moment. If you guys want to take a quick break for 2 minutes or 1 minute, you're welcome to do so. And then I will be right back.